I've survived in America for 18 years, watching my mother, with no support of her own, raise two children as she watches her life and the world fall apart around her. Having to live, if you can even call it that, in a world where she had to feed her children the last of the food that month, where she would never know whether or not we'll be in the same house or any house at all because the wages from the 3 jobs she worked couldn't meet rent. Having no time for yourself or your children, and in the rare event you get some, you're too exhausted to function. Being forced to believe that if you just work harder, if you just keep pushing, something better awaits. She started working at 14, going on to study under a master Japanese chef, climbing ladders and jumping obstacles to find herself fulfilling her lifelong dream of being able to open a taco truck. Despite being able to realize that dream, despite persevering through the struggle, despite holding gratitude for what we have, she still cannot meet rent. She still cannot feed the house. She still has no time not dedicated to helping someone else make profit or keep afloat her micro business. She wakes up wondering whether or not it is worth going on. This is an immeasurably strong and wise woman with so much to offer the world and so much left to experience, seriously considering ending it all. And you know what? You can't blame her. Her dignity as a human being has been stripped from her. On top of deep and long-lasting personal trauma, you find yourself beaten down, further traumatized by the world around you. Your soul twisted to the point where it would rather not be here, asking yourself, what do I wake up for? Her life defined by the struggle she had no part in imposing on herself, dedicating her time to trying and making sure that her children's lives were not defined by that same struggle. And for whatever reason, I was conscious of that at a very early age, able to empathize deeply with what she was going through, but isolating myself, hiding from it all as a response. Wandering off into my own world to try and ignore the ravaging seas around me. Born into the working class, I had to come to terms very early on with the fact that I was born against the current. I chose to blame myself, as so many of us do, trying to find what I was doing that caused us to be in that situation. As I came of age, I started to understand what fear is and the part it played in my life. We were living in an apartment in Peterborough. I must have been in 5th grade or something along those lines, coming home on the bus, walking back with all the kids on that stop and saying hi to this kid my friends and I had seen around the neighborhood. It was an innocuous conversation, basic hellos, and we went our separate ways. The parents of our friend group were having a cookout, and as we were all hanging out, I had run off for something in the parking lot when I heard the door from two down from mine swing open, and the mother of that kid storming towards me, with steam shooting from her ears, her eyes locked on me with her finger pointing. What the fuck makes you think you can sell drugs to my kid? Out of shock, out of fear, I tried shutting down, but she had me cornered, towering over me as she accused me, a 5th grade kid, of having sold her child drugs, threatening to call the police and have me arrested. I was able to escape somehow, and I ran inside, bawling my eyes out. "What's wrong?" my mother asked from the kitchen. I can barely speak, I'm so choked up, when I managed to get out just enough for her to know what happened. She storms past me to the woman's house, pounding on the door, screaming for her to come out. They go back and forth. My mom calls her off and nearly throwing punches, saying, "I'll get arrested for my kid." That may have been the end of that, but it was far from the only time I, as a child who felt isolated and alone around so many, felt that same way. I had a choice between living under the definition imposed on me before birth or breaking free of that definition, no longer living under the vice of fear. The life that my family and I live requires us to stand up in the face of evil. It requires us not to capitulate to fear, because it is then that your oppressor has won. Because it is then that you give in to the pain and accept it as a part of life. being able to instill in myself at a young age a sense of gratitude for the little we had, keeping us going in the face of everything going wrong. Now, even with my mother having achieved her dream, even with everything in our life seemingly getting a little bit better, with us appreciating everything we have, with a new iPhone coming out, we still lack rent. We still lack the ability to pay rent. We still lack the ability to fill our gas tank and heat our house. We still have an empty pantry from some weeks to another. This is not the story. Our story is not the product of poor choices, laziness, or a lack of gratitude. It is the product of a world which has people living as we do, not as a mistake, but as a necessity. Our story is not unique. It is the story of being poor in America. The story differs in the way it manifests itself. Many, because of the corporate consolidation of the media, are led to believe that it is another without power that is the cause of their pain, not those with. Being told that those who have a different relationship to God are evil. Being told that those who make a treacherous journey here from places ravaged by the military-industrial complex are here to subvert your way of life. Media showing images of black people in the streets, expressing deep-seated and long-lasting anger and calling them domestic terrorists. Looking down at someone overdosing on the street with no home and judging that person, instead of seeing a world that produces the situation that they're in. The American oligarchs have twisted our minds, pushing media which incentivizes consumption to the point where each and every one of us can feel the siren call of that new iPhone or the hum of a Tesla. As a cat chases the laser pointer, we chase things, never satisfied. They have us caught up in an endless loop of acquiring material goods, while the soul of our world gets washed away. We all feel the lack of soul in our music, the shallow nature of our relationships, of our jobs. Everything has been turned into a commodity. Even the deepest of feelings, the most intimate of moments, exploited in the aid of growing the power of those with it all. All of us are so wrapped up in the rat race, holding to the belief that if we just get one peg higher, if you just gain institutional power yourself, you'll be able to affect more change. The material allure of becoming well-liked. In that pursuit, in climbing those ladders, you succumb to the pressure, conforming to the wicked. The obsession with materialism includes obsession with status in a world such as this. Those who reach that status end up shallow leaders, claiming to be engaged in a fight for justice, saying you love the people while standing to the side as the corporate state brutalizes them. Well-meaning individuals, stripped of their principles and molded into merely a cog in a machine, leaving the people to fend for themselves. The powerful using those who have achieved status as an example, telling those impoverished that if they just work hard enough, they too will have status and success one day. Hustle, don't stop, ignore people around you, focus on growing your own power. This false and destructive mentality keeps people justifying the world that is screwing them in every which way. The reality is almost none of us will reach that peak. And if you do get there, you'll be left asking yourself if it was truly worth it. Was it worth it to ignore humanity? You're at the top, but as you look around, nothing has changed. Mothers don't have enough to pay the corporate masters to get necessary medical care for their newborn. Families evicted from the only home they've known. The people left to fend for themselves, watching their jobs get sold overseas by a government allowing multinational corporations with no allegiance to any flag whatsoever to move these jobs to low-wage countries, ravaged by militarism. Those whom we've subjected to wage slavery here at home, made to be pawns of a military-industrial complex that endangers the world. For almost a century, we have pillaged nations who hold resources beneficial to the continuation of a machine, of the machine of materialism here at home. The talking heads on television love to talk about the divide in our nation, and there is one. But there is no mention of the real unifier in America: endless war and endless death, subjecting countries like the Sudan into the Stone Age and continuing to bomb them afterwards, murdering leaders which try to stand up to this worldwide, committing war crimes with impunity and bragging about it for re-election. If there is any illusion about this, there are individuals with the power of nations determining this at a policy level for their own benefit. It is not in the United States' interest to bomb nations which pose no threat to us, using people we have let be poor to murder others poorer in Iraq, Afghanistan, and so many others. It is in the interest of an elite, the oil barons, pharma, prison, executive, and banking executives, and others with real power in this world, which have, at this point, complete regulatory capture over the entire world. And again, the masses sit back, fighting amongst themselves while this goes on. We have watched movements with the energy to change the world dissipate that energy over quarrels on what label to use, how nice we should be to our oppressor. Movements with leaders making safe and calculated decisions when up against pure and unadulterated evil. Moderation in the face of evil will never overcome evil. If we never rock the boat, challenge the economic status quo, and realize the true divide of class, we will never reach the mountaintop. We must spark a real and sustained movement of love, compassion, understanding, and justice, not just for ourselves, but for those who are yet to come, and for those who have gone. We owe it to our ancestors who persevered through the worst of what humanity has to offer. It is their undying courage which must be restored. To do that, we must deal with our own cowardice. Cowardice which requires you to look death right in the eye, ridding yourself of any idea that the idea that many of us have that we're here forever. Accepting your time may be tomorrow. You're not working to conform if you knew that you were dying in 6 months. You'd be trying to love as hard as you could. We got to live as if we're going to die every day, loving as hard as we can. This is a world worth saving. There is love in all of us, beauty in everything, the deepest of history and the greatest of stories. I want a world for my children which cherishes that beauty, a world with soul. With us constantly searching for a person who can bring about that world, I ask you to look within. All of us have the greatest of evil within our souls, but we have an even greater love. And tapping into that love, being able to truly love unconditionally, loving your mother, loving your brothers and sisters, loving your world, loving yourself, without condition, for they are you and you them. We are all together human beings, deserving of that world of love. Only when we move past our own hatred, our own angst and anger, and start imagining a new world, will a new world manifest. This individualist-minded culture doesn't change the reality that we are one people. We are still a collective, however lost, still living together despite thinking we live apart. When you inspire others to start loving unconditionally, they love without condition as well. It is then that no person could see millions upon millions of children drink poisoned water. It is then that no person could allow a government to starve the people of a nation with no infrastructure, building bombs to murder them instead of fixing those pipes. No person could sit back while a single mother works 3 jobs and contemplates suicide. Loving unconditionally is the only way to bring about true liberation. The liberation of all people from the oppressive forces in this world comes from the liberation of us all. And as we look upon what can only be described as the end of an empire, we must rid ourselves of the cowardice which causes us to look away, to feel guilt or capitulate for status in the pursuit of aesthetic representation in this twisted world. Instill that sense of true courage. Courage is a force necessary for love. And when thinking of how to live that courage, look to the ancestors which had no choice. Look to the people living right now that have no choice. This is a moment which requires us to purge the spirit of nihilism and really think differently. I'm not dying leaving this world as wicked as I left it. Too many people have. I will die knowing that we left a better world for the generations to come. A world where they can have those deep social conversations about race and gender because there isn't a single person struggling to survive. This world is not just a dream. It is a mandate from those for whom we live. A moral obligation to do what is right in the face of such evil. To not capitulate to the master for the sake of pragmatism, and to stand strong with your back up straight and your soul on fire, ready to usher in the end of this era of hate and greed and exploitation. The domestic terror threat we face is not from our fellow citizens, but rather from those who have been in power for so long. Again, the oil barons, the prison executives, the pharma shareholders, and the rest of the lot. Nice enough to put on a show the last few decades of two parties claiming to fight for you, while both fighting to shepherd energy which could take on the real enemy into meaningless battles. The Republicans shepherding real and justified anger of the white working class into lies about someone without power is the cause of all their struggle. Immigrants, black people, etc. Or the Democrats telling multiracial working class that if they don't moderate themselves, if they don't stop telling the truth of the evil that they face and just simmer down and stay quiet and vote, the Republicans are going to make their life even worse. This cycle has forced the majority of the people into apathy, barely engaging with the political system for so long because their anger is left unaddressed. The apathy in this system for so long has been dealt with by using sports games, TV, entertainment, the phone, other forms of media, the modern sedatives of the Western world. Give them bread and circuses, and they will never revolt. Unfortunately for Juneval, people are not only tired of bread and circuses after centuries of being fed them, they can no longer afford that bread. Sooner or later, you reap what you sow. Sooner or later, what you choose to ignore will become unavoidable. Whether or not we witness what can only be described as a neo-fascist revolution, which takes the fascism we experience under the prestige of the American empire now and Nazifies it, or a revolution of love, which recognizes the soul in every human being and builds not a better world but a new one, is up to us, the young people who have yet to lose our fire, the people who have nothing to lose but their life. If we are to achieve a renaissance of love, we have to look within and deal with that cowardice. Cowardice which causes us to make decisions based on whether or not it is safe, whether or not it will be popular or politically expedient. This moment asks us to look towards our conscience, to look towards the moral center at the core of our soul for guidance. And when we do that, making decisions based on morality, we can take on the Goliath which stands at the Golden Gate of justice. We can step into that new world because we got to do what is right because it is right. We are living in a world made from leaders choosing the safe path, which has kept the powerful in power. I'm motivated to do what I can to stop the machine in whatever time I have here because I know that it has never been this bad. Despite the bubble we live in here, it has never been this bad on this planet. We are at a precipice and can decide either to observe the world slowly descend into the hell which awaits us now, or stand up to the evil in power that rots and exploits our well-intentioned collective soul, and I choose the latter. I'm a black man in America who's been called a nigger, who has walked down the streets only to feel the gaze of those who see you out of place, who knows going out means death is only a wrong move away. I know the realities of race in this country, but I also know that racism is only a projection of fear, fear which stems from feeling subhuman. When you live unable to meet your basic needs, even though all your time is spent working, you don't feel like a human being. I know this feeling because I feel it. My mother feels it. My grandmother, my sister, everyone in my life in one way or another feeling alone amongst so many. And I feel comfortable making the assumption that many of you watching feel that way as well. I've had too many conversations with friends of mine or children just barely getting into their teenage years who tell me they would rather be dead than live in this world. I've known too many who have made that decision. It is far past time that we as a people realize the true sense of urgency here. When I started to feel alone, to feel defeated by a world I had no hand in building, I had to have a conversation with myself that many of us seem to avoid. I had to think about my own mortality, the fact that I will not be here forever, and I may not be here long at all. Will I choose to live a life ignoring the fact the powerful, through materialism, war, and poverty, murder our brothers and sisters, pulling my bootstraps up to my shoulders, only to find myself in a situation worse than my mother in 10 years? Or will I do everything in my power as someone with a shared struggle to so many to wake up the others, bringing them into a sustained movement for justice, not building a better world, but ushering in a new one, centered around love, compassion, and justice for every person living within? I choose to dedicate my life to that mission. To take on the Goliath, we must purge the coward within us all, channeling the spirit of our ancestors who fought their battles so that we could win now. We owe it not just to the children and ourselves, we owe it to those who came before us, those who, when face to face with the worst of humanity, spat in the face of fear. We cannot allow their lives, their work, their deaths to have been in vain. There is the energy for a real movement here in New Hampshire and across the world, a movement of working class people which can bring about a paradigm shift, bringing the true revolution of love to reality. What it takes to bring that movement together is leaders who understand that capitulation of your morality is not moderation nor compromise. Leaders that understand when you speak with integrity to the catastrophe that people are in, those people will put their trust in you. And once they've entrusted you, actualizing change in their lives. Not change here and there, but a true fundamental shift to the nature of society and the power distribution within. To bring people who normally wouldn't be together, overcoming divisions which keep the working class fighting amongst themselves, once and for all ending this era of hatred and greed, this plague of our society. Call this a naive vision if you wish, and people will. But we have that courage. No matter the opposition, our spirits will be true. We will spit in the face of evil. I admit it's a steep battle, but again, we cannot forget those for whom we will do this for. The children who'd rather not wake up. The mother fighting to survive. The holy cities of our world ravaged by war. Those who are yet to be with us and those who no longer are. The people are ready to stand strong and defeat the Goliath which stands between us and the field of love. It is time we, those who understand the moral obligation we are in, the world we have to build, and the urgency of doing so, to become leaders and end the mentality of fear which keeps us from taking on that fight. Defeat the Goliath that is the oil baron, pharma, banking, prison executives, and the rest of the powerful, and step into that new world of love. We know the moral obligation to the people to do so, and we must do so. Those in power need be scared. A movement is brewing, a movement of love. The people cannot and will not take it anymore. After being beaten down for centuries in a one-sided war for power, we, the people, declare war on you. No longer may you subject our mothers to fear of the world of their child. No longer will you militarize our love or twist our morality to have us murder others in the same or worse situations as us across the world. No longer will we allow you to use resources which subject our civilization to its end. No longer will we let you tell us to ignore the spirit in us all, which tells us this is not how it's supposed to be, because this is not how it's supposed to be. The intimidation must end. The oppression must end. We will not subject our world to this hell any longer. We will not only be heard and respected, but we will take control of our own lives and usher in that new world. The message of love and solidarity awaits. The symphony of love calls us forward. And in one way or another, I will see you at the Promised Land. Thank you very much.